How did the US go from being one of Ukraine's biggest supporters to cutting off all military aid?
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship.
This is something that Putin could only have dreamed of.
In recent weeks, there's been a massive shift in the US's support for Ukraine in its struggle against Russia's ongoing invasion. We've seen President Trump publicly berate Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
Your country's in big trouble. You're not acting at all thankful. You're gambling with World War III.
This moment sent shockwaves around the world.
This is going to be great television, I will say that.
Embarrassing exchange.
One of the most appalling scenes I think I've ever seen in international diplomacy.
We've also seen the US break with its allies and side with Russia at the UN, voting against calls for Russia to pull its troops out of Ukraine. President Trump has also been criticized for repeating Russian talking points, like blaming Ukraine for starting the war.
You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
And calling President Zelenskyy a dictator.
He refuses to have elections. A dictator without elections.
Both are claims that virtually no other world leader has been making.
Well, he's running Vladimir Putin's lines.
It sounds a bit like a ventriloquist dummy. He's almost mouthing the words of Vladimir Putin.
The President of the United States is siding with a Russian dictator.
All of this hasn't gone unnoticed in Russia.
Clearly, we've had a major US-European break on all of this, something that I think the Russians in their wildest hopes wouldn't have dreamt of.
Putin has so far gotten everything he could have wanted.
It was really impossible to imagine before. The new administration is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations. This largely coincides with our vision.
When President Zelenskyy last visited the White House, he was given a hero's welcome and assured that he'd get the support he needed to prevail against Russia. President Trump, on the other hand, has refused to even say he's on Ukraine's side and is instead trying to portray the US as a neutral arbiter. So, what's behind this massive shift? One of the biggest factors here is President Trump's America First policy.
During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
The war between Russia and Ukraine has had a massive impact on global trade, contributed to the cost of living crisis around the world, and seen the US and Europe give billions of dollars to Ukraine.
We are spending our treasure on a country that's very, very far away.
President Trump had repeatedly bragged before taking office that he'd be able to end the war in a day.
I will end that war in one day. It'll take 24 hours. 100%, it would be easy. That deal would be easy.
For the past 3 years, the strategy of Western nations, like the US, has been trying to force Russia to compromise through sanctions and international isolation. What we're seeing now instead is President Trump's administration trying to force Ukraine to compromise in an effort to wrap things up quickly, as the US has a huge amount of leverage over Ukraine right now as its biggest source of military aid. What we've started to see already is the US telling Ukraine to give up its main bargaining chips before negotiations have even begun.
NATO you can forget about.
Returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective.
They have already sacrificed a lot without getting anything from Putin.
Aside from his America First policy, President Trump has also repeatedly said he wants to end the fighting and bloodshed as quickly as possible.
It's time to end the senseless war.
And when he's faced pushback from Ukrainian President Zelenskyy on how a peace deal is achieved, he's accused him of not wanting peace.
Well, you're saying you don't want a ceasefire? I want a ceasefire. Because
whether or not President Trump actually believes Ukraine is to blame for being invaded by Russia, or that President Zelenskyy is a dictator that doesn't want peace, shifting blame for the invasion to both sides makes it easier for the US to justify its new position, and also sets the stage for the US and Russia to rebuild ties, something the president has signaled he's keen to do and believes would be a big economic win for both nations.
look, it's a great thing if we settle this. It's great for Russia too, because we can do deals there. They have very valuable land.
Supporters of the US's position argue that it's simple. The past 3 years of trying to force Russia to compromise hasn't brought the war to an end. So it's time to try something different to achieve peace, even if it means Ukraine having to give up land. The counter position to this is that it's not that simple, and there's a lot more at stake here. It's important not to lose sight of the fact that Russia has illegally invaded and seized the land of another country, and independent inquiries have also concluded that Russians have been committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in Ukraine.
We are seeing so many reports of so many types of violation. Prisoners of war tortured, sexual and gender-based crime allegations.
Even President Putin himself currently has an arrest warrant out with the International Criminal Court for the war crime of illegally deporting children from Ukraine. This is one of the reasons why Ukraine and many world leaders are so adamant that Russia needs to be held accountable and can't just be allowed to keep the land it's taken.
We cannot accept that borders will be changed by force.
The people of Ukraine are fighting not just for their own national sovereignty. They are fighting for the international rule of law.
This isn't just about getting justice for the victims of what's already happened. It's also about what comes next. Former US President Biden and his administration maintained that the cost of supporting Ukraine was worth it, because the consequences of not doing so would be worse.
The stakes couldn't be higher in this moment. If Russia's aggression is allowed to proceed in Ukraine with impunity, it will not stop with Ukraine. And other would-be aggressors in other parts of the world will take note and consider pursuing their own aggressions.
The argument here is that international law loses its meaning if a country like Russia can successfully invade its neighbour, steal its land, and reportedly commit numerous atrocities without facing any real consequences. All it does is encourage other countries to do the same, and Russia to try again.
We want peace, but we don't want a ceasefire that's a capitulation by Ukraine, because that's dangerous. And we know that would lead to Russia going further.
This is a big reason why President Zelenskyy has been pushing so hard for security guarantees from the US. President Zelenskyy says the only way to stop Russia from invading again is if Ukraine's allies give guarantees that they'll step in to defend Ukraine if it happens.
They would be feeling extremely nervous that Putin will simply use any peace deal to rearm and try again.
President Zelenskyy has repeatedly said that no one wants peace more than Ukrainians, but any kind of peace deal without security guarantees isn't real peace, because President Putin has repeatedly lied and broken ceasefires.
But after that, he broken this ceasefire.
The notion that somehow Putin's going to take what he's got and then go home and be fine is absolute nonsense.
President Trump, on the other hand, has said that he believes President Putin will honour any peace deal that he himself negotiates.
I know him very well. Yeah, I think he wants peace. I think he would tell me if he didn't.
The question many are asking is whether or not President Trump actually believes this, or if he's just less interested in how the war ends and more interested in it just ending, and ending quickly.
It has a big effect in Europe. It doesn't have much of an effect on us because we have a big, beautiful ocean in between.
So, what does all of this mean going forward? As the US has shifted away from Ukraine, other leaders from Europe and around the world have made it clear they still firmly support Ukraine and its president.
I stand with Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
We will continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Russia is the aggressor. Zelenskyy is a war leader whose country has been invaded. And we should all be supporting him and not fawning over Putin.
The events of the past few weeks have led to a realization for many that they may no longer be able to rely on the US to guarantee their safety.
The Europeans now understand that this is the beginning, probably, of the US exit from Europe.
This is a critical moment to step up our commitment to our own defences across Europe.
The world has changed, America has changed, and we cannot assume that we can rely on America in the way we have in the past.
Between this, the US sanctioning the International Criminal Court, and President Trump threatening to take over the likes of Canada, Gaza, Greenland, and Panama, it's clear that the US is becoming even less interested in presenting itself as a leader and upholder of international law, and more openly set on doing whatever it believes is best for America first.
He does not believe in the international rules-based order. Trump believes that might is right.
We have to worry about the prospect of, will the United States now be more of a friend to dictators than to democracies? And if that's the case, then, the nature of the world has changed. Power and power relations become the new sort of determinant, and helping yourself becomes the sort of main organising principle. And that's a very worrying and dark kind of place to be.